Hey everybody, it's Fussy Bird. It's been a little while since my last video. Sorry about the wait. The last one was just that Creeping Frost Machine Gunner. It was a lot of fun. It was for Path of Exile. That is not why you came to this video though. You came for the D4 content, and that's what I plan to bring. So what's the point of the video? Well, the point is that I've been taking a look at a lot of starter builds that are going around on YouTube and a lot of starter builds on Reddit. And something that I've noticed is that, and I was doing this too in my starter plans earlier on, something that I've noticed is that everyone is taking glyphs. Now, I don't have anything against glyphs. Glyphs are obviously overpowered. We're all going to use them. The more glyphs, the better, right? It's just going to be great. The problem I have with glyphs and why I do not plan to have my entire starter build at all with any glyphs, the reason why I'm doing this is because I don't believe that any of us have a clue as to how often glyphs will drop. We don't know the rarity or the drop tables of the types of glyphs that we want. For example, I want ambidextrous as my first glyph, but how do I know when ambidextrous is going to drop for me? How do I know when I'm going to have enough money to go and trade for ambidextrous from somebody else? So to plan my board around having ambidextrous from the beginning, or even in my opinion, week one, is just silly, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to set myself up for a really bad time. Now you might be asking yourself or saying, well, hey, there's blue glyphs too. There's the magic ones. And yeah, there are. The magic glyphs, maybe they're actually good. There might be some really good affixes we can get on the magic glyphs. I don't think we have enough information on them just yet to really understand, but at least not that I know of. But the magic glyphs, something that you'll have to understand is that just like rare glyphs, they will also need to be leveled up, I have to imagine. So leveling them up, what we do know about leveling them up is that it requires you to complete specific dungeon activities. So whatever that means could mean that you're only doing just one small dungeon activity, one and done after doing the dungeon, and then boom, you got a level. But the more realistic explanation, I think, for it is that we're going to be doing repetitive dungeon activities in each dungeon in order to gain levels for our glyphs. So repetitive activities in the nightmare dungeons that you're going to be able to gain levels for your glyphs that way. Again, I could be wrong. This is all speculation. Don't take this as word of gospel or quotes or anything like that. But I truly think that leveling up the glyphs and acquiring the glyphs is going to be a lot harder than we're all thinking it's going to be, simply based on the amount of power they give. And if you're thinking that you might just grab a glyph and slot it in there, well, just keep in mind that this is your starting radius. Is just a 2 socket. Oh, whoops. Not that. So this is your starting radius, is just literally 2 nodes from the glyph socket. So it is not a giant radius. You can just delete that line there. It's not a giant radius. It's a far shot from the one that you get when you're upgraded, which is way the fuck out here. So what I'm doing and what I'm planning for, in my opinion, is this. My Paragon board on my starter, keep in mind everybody's Paragon boards are going to be different. My Paragon board, when I start the game, will likely not look exactly like this. It will have the idea in mind. I'll have that idea in mind, but it likely will not look exactly like this because we'll maybe have different requirements that we're looking for. So I'm gonna just go with this as my baseline. This is what I have in mind, and ultimately the plan was to go for the boards that offer me the most value for my build first through their rare and magic nodes, as well as their legendary node. This one's gaining me a lot of fortify based on the amount of fury we spend. We spend a lot of fury in the build, so we're going to be able to gain a lot of fortify. In addition, it's also going to give me a lot of max fury and fury gen. It's giving me a great 10% damage node here from the guarded advance, as well as more max fury. It's giving me res, life, and finally some more fizz damage. So it's just an overall really powerful board for my build, and ultimately the first one that I'm going to want to target when we're busting out of the first gate. From there, we're going to continue on to the Decimator board, and this one we're not taking the legendary node. It's just, you know, I don't really have a need to take it. If I do find that I have a need to take it for whatever reason, I'm just finding like vulnerability uptime is bad, which I don't see how that's going to happen in my build, but if it does happen, then I could always just spec on over here and maybe just, you know, come out over from these guys or something like that, pull some, I'll figure that shit out, don't worry about me. But in any case, the whole idea is spec out from here and get on over to Blood Rage. Blood Rage is going to grant us Berserking, 10% chance to grant Berserking for 5 seconds on killing a bleeding enemy. This one I am taking for the time being, but I do plan to switch it up with Flawless Technique in the end game, because Berserking uptime, I imagine by that time for me, is going to be ridiculously high, and we probably won't need this node anymore. So that's kind of the plan for that. And lastly, I'll be finishing off with Hemorrhage. And Hemorrhage, I gain the bleed from one of my aspects. And so Hemorrhage is actually going to give us 12% more damage to bleeding enemies that have bled for more than 3 seconds. This is a really powerful node for, especially for like single target bossing, elites, things like that, anything that might be alive for more than 3 seconds. Really powerful node in my opinion. And yeah, ultimately the whole idea of my tree or my board was that I was designing it in a way so that I could have only a couple points that I have to use in order to get my glyph sockets in, and I also have 40 points remaining as well, and I made that the case so that this is more of a representation of where I should be around perhaps like level 75, maybe rounding around level 80ish, that equivalent, right? So in my mind, I think that this is kind of a safe bet. You know, write me in the comments if you think I'm setting myself up for failure, if you think it's wrong, but truly, I think this is a really smart play. I think it puts us in position for a lot of the juicy nodes. We're taking literally like every fucking blue and magic node, or sorry, magic and rare node on our boards that's available to us. We're also granting ourselves legendaries, and we're putting ourselves in position for glyphs. I don't think it gets any better than that. We have a lot of remaining points left so that we can make adjustments if things go awry, and it really gives us a nice balanced approach to our stat sheet as well. This is something I wanted to really draw attention to, because what I've seen a lot, and again, I'm no expert, guys. Like, I'm not trying to come off as, you know, I'm the fucking authority on D4 here in making builds. I'm absolutely not. I know probably just as much as, you know, most people do that have done a modicum of theory crafting. However, what I have seen is still a little concerning when I think about the starter builds that have been passed out and that are going around YouTube and things like that, because what I keep seeing is A, I see a lot of glyphs, B, I see offensive sheets on the stats that have like so much damage built in. Like, it's just all damage, 180% increased damage with physical, like fucking 75% vulnerable damage, 170% overpower damage. It's just damage all the way down the board. And then I look at the defensive sheet and it's like 8% increased life, 600 armor, zero resistances, like the 6% resist all, and like no resistances whatsoever on the board. No real damage reduction whatsoever, other than a shout perhaps. It's just like a lot of things. And then as well as the utility, we go on to the resource generation. There's no max fury being scaled. There's no fury generation being scaled. These are all things that I think are being they're giant oversights for a lot of people, and everyone is focused so hard on damage right now, whereas in my mind the game is already giving us so much damage. Like I'm speaking from the position of a barbarian here. The game gives us so much damage from our skill tree and our aspects, and it's insane. So I don't see how we're going to need so much more damage scaling coming from the Paragon board outside of what we're already being able to grant ourselves in my build here. And not to mention from the berserking scaling, it's just insane. So to me, this is going to be more of a healthy approach to a tree. Yes, I do have some attributes that I'll have to get, but again, we have a lot more Paragon points left. This is without gear, and this is without getting any attribute points through our renown as well. So ultimately, I just think that this is going to be a much more balanced approach. Again, let me know what you think in the comments. I think I'm in for a good time though with this Barb. One thing I did want to jump to is I wanted to jump over the core of the build and kind of what we're doing here. Obviously, if you just came for the Paragon theory stuff, that was it for that. But now I just wanted to talk about the actual barbarian himself and what I'm planning to do with this Barb. So the idea is that we're going to be a berserking double swing Barb, and he's going to have insanely high uptime of berserking as well as a lot of fury generation. The reason for the resource generation I'll go over in just a second here, but ultimately we have a lot built in. So the build starts out with Lunging Strike. Lunging Strike, in my opinion, is by far the best generator skill in this game. Frenzy could maybe be better in late game, maybe. But I really think that Lunging Strike just takes the cake, especially when you consider it from a PvP perspective. If you're a PvPer, Lunging Strike is going to be nutty, guys, because this thing's range is pretty damn good. It's not like it has a really short range. It deals half decent damage. It's not that great a damage, but it's half decent. But the real juice for it for me comes from the enhancements. The Lunging Strike enhancement giving you 2% max life when you damage a healthy enemy, that is just amazing because you are gaining health, a heal, based off of the maximum life that you have, which is insane because if you stack lots and lots of life, you're just getting more and more healing and leeching. That's unbelievable. That's really strong. Then we look at Combat Lunging Strike. Critical strikes granting us berserking for 1.5 seconds. That's also really strong, assuming that you're getting yourself a decent amount of crit chance. So really just an overall powerful fucking utility skill for a generator, and knowing that this is something that you get right off the hop, it's just, to me, it's just awesome, man. The core skill that we're using is Double Swing. So Double Swing we're using for a couple of reasons. One, Double Swing gets no love, man. Like, what the fuck's up with that? Everybody's hating on Double Swing for some reason and just not using it. Everybody wants to play their Whirlwind or play their Hammer of the Ancients or some shit. And I'm here to tell you that Double Swing is going to be an absolute slapper of a build. I'm not saying that Whirlwind's not. Whirlwind, Upheaval, whatever. Fuck Upheaval. But Whirlwind and Hammer of the Ancients is definitely looking fucking really strong. And, you know, obviously they're meta for a reason. But Double Swing, I honestly think is just a slept on skill. I think that it's amazing. I was using it in the betas, had a fucking wonderful time with it. And the way it works is you sweep your weapons from opposite direction and you deal 50% damage with each weapon and enemies caught in the center are damaged by both. So what that means is it's effectively 100% damage that you're getting between the two weapons, because it's 50% times 2, which is really, really nice. The other thing you have to keep in mind is the lucky hit chance. 30% is from... I believe that is per swing. Someone could maybe correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe that is per swing. So one attack being 2 swings, that is 30%, 30%. So you're getting like a 60% effective lucky hit chance as well, which is pretty damn nice. The real juice comes from its enhancements as well. Double swing damages, if double swing damages a stunned or knocked down enemy, gain 25 fury. Meaning, if we damage a stunned enemy, it's a free swing of double swing, which is a free core skill, which is amazing. I'll tell you how we take advantage of that in just a second. And then we have Furious Double Swing, which is casting double swing while berserking grants 2 additional seconds of berserking. So this will work hand in hand with combat lunging strike, as well as with our ulti, as well as with our the other skill that goes, what the hell is that thing called? This one, not the ulti, but unconstrained, which, by the way, we'll be changing this in late game. This is an early game thing, and you could also choose walking arsenal, totally up to you. I'm just going with unconstrained, but I digress. This is going to be able to give us an insane amount of berserking uptime. So the whole plan is basically just be berserking all the time. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Now, for the CC, we have Ground Stomp. Ground Stomp's going to be stunning enemies for 3 seconds. With the enhancement, it's 4 seconds. And then it's also going to generate us 25 Fury. So even more Fury generation. Now, another thing to mention is that in the late game, once our Fury generation is just fucking off the charts, that's when we switch over to Strategic Ground Stomp and reduce our ulti's cooldowns by 1 second for every enemy damaged by Ground Stomp. Another thing we take is Imposing Presence. We do this just for the additional maximum life boost. It's a lot of max life. That's 15% more additional max life. And if you remember from the enhanced lunging strike, all the more max life scaling that we give is only going to enhance this heal more. The Rallying Cry and Challenging Shout, we take these as our 2 shouts. I know a lot of people are taking War Cry. Me personally, I don't think Warcry is worth it. If you have enough Berserk uptime already built in, like Berserking's kind of your thing, I really don't see a point to taking Warcry because it's just 15% more damage, which is great, don't get me wrong, but 15% more damage versus 40% damage reduction, I think I'd rather go with the damage reduction. And in addition to that, Challenging Shout is also going to give me 20% more bonus maximum life, which again is only going to help out our enhanced lunging strike more. And then it's also going to give me 3 fury each time I take damage. Now, something to keep in mind here is that any form of gaining fury resource generation that we have is actually being increased by a huge amount. One of those sources is 30% resource gen from Rallying Cry. We also get 20% resource gen from its enhancement. We also get additional resource gen from Prime Wrath of the Berserker, and then we also get additional resource gen through our aspects, as well as additional resource gen through our Paragon. So there's a shit ton of additional resource generation that's coming here, and therefore that 3 fury is actually not 3 fury. It's more like a 7 or 8 fury that we're gaining every time we take damage, and it becomes really, really, really powerful. Another thing that we have is Booming Voice. This is to increase the effect, the durations of our shouts by 24%. So we'll have, I think it's like 7 or 8 second shouts, which is really nice. And then for being in parties, we heal our allies for 1% of their life. Really powerful. Gaining some movement speed. This is totally up in the air. I put it in here because I love going fast in these games. But honestly, we're going to have a lot of movement speed already coming from like a lot of different sources here, especially just like we don't even have boots on, right? So we're going to get some movement speed coming through. We don't have gear on yet. And I just feel like this may be a waste of 3 points, but I'm keeping it there just because, again, I like going fast. But the aggressive resistance, that's nice. Some damage reduction while berserking, and then additional increased fury generation. So more resource gen while we're berserking. Another thing we do, increase damage to close enemies and some damage reduction from distant, and then increase critical strike chance against the immobilized, stunned, or slowed enemies. So that increased crit chance is obviously just going to help us out with keeping our enhancement on our lunging strike active, and making sure that we're dealing lots of crits. Thick skin and counter offensive, I honestly believe these are fucking like just so strong. The fact that each time you take direct damage, you gain 1.2% base life as Fortify. Fortify is broken, by the way, for anybody who's not using it. It's fucking busted OP, and I'll tell you right now that this is just so strong. Like 1.2% of your base life as Fortify sounds really strong to me. And then while I have Fortify for over 50% of my max life, I deal 12% more damage, which is really, really nice. We get some attack speed here. We get some more max fury here. Take Wrath of the Berserker, and I take this one obviously just for more berserking uptime, which is always great. We gain Unstoppable from it as well. But the real juice on Wrath of the Berserker comes in from its enhancements, which gives us further resource generation, more movement speed, and then in addition to that, while it's active, for every 50 fury we spend, we increase Berserk's damage bonus by 25%. So if you've been following, you remember this whole build is built around getting a lot more max fury. So we stack up max fury. We get a lot of resource gen. We cast our ability for free, our core skill for free against stunned enemies. And so the only limiter here to gain a shit ton of bonus damage is our attack speed, which we scale in droves because we're a berserking fucking barbarian. So again, this will become insanely strong. And essentially what my idea is that I would be able to swap my generator from lunging strike once I have a decent amount of movement speed built in, lunging strike to frenzy, therefore gaining myself even further attack speed, obviously attack speed on gear, aspects, all that kind of stuff. I imagine we should be able to abuse the absolute fuck out of this node, and I don't see any kind of limit here. So I have to imagine that this is just an exponentially scaling node that as long as I have good attack speed, I can easily be hitting numbers of 200 to 300% more damage while I'm berserking, which to me is just fucking insane. For the early game, we're going to be looking at Unconstrained. I've honestly been juggling between the two, Unconstrained and Walking Arsenal. Only reason why I say Unconstrained is just because I'll be berserking so much anyways, and it's 25% more damage, so that's nice. And then we increase the max duration by 5 seconds, which is also really nice because I believe that will apply. I'm not sure if it'll apply to my my enhancement on my lunging strike, like all sources of berserk, or if it just applies to berserk through like Wrath of the Berserker or something. I'm not exactly sure how that 5 seconds applies, but ultimately I'm just looking at the 25% more damage. I think that's pretty nice, but for early game I could also take Walking Arsenal. It's really, really nice. For the late game though, Unbridled Rage will be without a doubt unbelievably broken, and we will be taking that. And if you've been following closely, once again, since those skills are costing us more fury, it's actually only helping us in this case, and it's also helping us on our Warbringer node. So it's just one of those things. Warbringer. So it's also helping us here. There's just so many nice synergies that start to come into play when you start playing with your resource gen that again, I think it's something that a lot of people are sleeping on, and I think it's going to be proving to be very, very strong in the end game. So very quickly, I'm just going to go over some of the important aspects here. I'm not going to go through all of them, but every aspect that you do see is a codex aspect. So I think another thing to 100% avoid, you've probably heard this on a lot of videos already, but definitely avoid taking any aspect that has any kind of RNG layer attached to it. If it's not on the codex, do not spec it in your starter Paragon, or sorry, your starter build. It's just a mistake. So some of the more important aspects I've got here is to start off, Echoing Fury and Umbral. These are going to generate massive amounts of resources. Again, the increased resource generation that we have, like we have a lot of it in this build, and that's going to apply to these as well. So again, more and more resources being generated at all times. The other thing that we have going on here is Aspect of the Retribution. This one, it's not really about the damage. I don't really care so much about that. It's more so about the first lines. Distant enemies have an 8% chance to be stunned for 2 seconds when they hit you. And the way my mind works is that, hey, while I'm cleaving and just murdering things that are close to me, there's obviously those ranged targets and ranged enemies that may hit me with like, you know, an arrow or some shit. And if they get stunned, that gives me a window where I can just literally press lunging strike on them. I'm immediately on top of that enemy, and now I can start double swinging on them as well. Again, this is more so just kind of theory in my head, but I imagine it should be nice to have just a little more stun protection and stunning chances to enemies that are not being currently hit by me. I think it's going to be really good for keeping up the free casts on double swing. So that, I think, is one of the more important ones. Another one is Aspect of the Berserk Ripping, and this one is whenever you deal direct damage while berserking, inflict 20% of the base damage dealt as additional bleeding damage over 5 seconds. And if you remember, the Paragon board has a legendary node, Hemorrhage, where it states enemies that have been affected by your bleeding for 3 or more seconds take 12% increased damage from you. So that's not just bleeding damage, that's all damage that they're going to be taking increased damage from. And so that's going to be really nice when working in synergy with Berserk Ripping. The last one is the Rapid Aspect. And Rapid Aspect is one where it's just a little quality of life for the early game. To gain us some attack speed on our lunging strike. I imagine I'll be dropping this the second I get some decent attack speed scaling through gear. But hey, for the early game, I'll definitely be shooting for this one nice and early because it's one of the first aspects that you can easily get your hands on. So yeah, I'll definitely be getting that one nice and early. As for the gems, this is kind of just personal preference in my opinion, but I went with critical strike damage to vulnerable enemies because that's really strong. I went with max life because that's really strong, and I went with resist all because we didn't grab as much resist all off the tree that I wanted to, the Paragon board. If I in late game get all my resistances capped, obviously that's the plan. I would just switch this up for the ultimate skill or barrier generation or something like that. The technique, again, up for debate. The sword ones are really, really strong. The pole arm one is actually, I think, is honestly slept on, to be honest. A lucky hit chance is really strong in this game, guys. And to be honest, like when you can get 10% more damage plus getting the 10% lucky hit chance, I think that's actually a pretty fair fucking node. It's really nice. So yeah, there's a lot of good options for the techniques, but I just chose the axes because, hey, increased damage to vulnerable enemies, increased critical strike chance against vulnerable enemies, kind of works hand in hand with our lunging strike enhancement, and also just helps out with damage against vulnerable enemies, which is really, really strong. The plan is not to use two-handed axes all the time. We're dual wielders, but two-handed axe will be what I lunging strike with, and that will make it easy to get the experience that is needed for the mastery itself. But yeah, that's about gonna do it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed the build, and I hope you enjoyed me rambling for what, like fucking 20 minutes or some shit. But in any case, I will end the suffering now. Again, remember, keep your Paragon boards clear and free of any glyphs for the starter. Do not troll yourself, and at the end of the day, find yourself a strong build, or make yourself a strong build that focuses on keeping the thing that deals, that allows you to deal your damage, your resources. Make sure it's focused on generating a lot of that. Otherwise, you're just going to be one of those guys who's spamming their generator skills, hating your life, and getting to use your core skill once every 4 attacks. It's terrible. So anyways, that'll do it. Love you guys. Take care. Peace out.